So this EIS comes out of the State Department. Now, you were just telling me before we got started, this is not the first EIS on Keystone?
No, this is actually the fifth EIS on Keystone. This environmental review really dates back to 2008 when the company who owns the pipeline, TransCanada, first submitted a permit or an application to get a permit from the State Department. And it's gone through this review several times. And so we've had a draft environmental impact statement and then a final environmental impact statement. But then they did a supplemental environmental impact statement, and then they had to start the clock all over because back in 2011, you may recall, the congressional Republicans forced a timeline Obama had to deny, and then that's put the clock back down to zero. We had another draft EIS, and now this is another final environmental impact statement. So that's why the statement, which basically came to the same conclusion as the last four, did not surprise me.
Yeah. And what is the bottom line, if you will, of this report? Is this pipeline good for the environment or bad for the environment? I mean, what's the report say?
Right. I think that's, very much depending on your perspective. But the bottom line, the most important part about this EIS is that the pipeline would not have a sizable impact and would not impact the development of the Canadian oil sands one way or another in most scenarios of what global oil prices are, which is really what drives all of this. And the difference between this EIS and past EISs is that this one looked at a wider range of scenarios of how low or high oil prices can get. And the conclusion was that this pipeline would not have a sizable impact one way or the other on the development of the carbon-heavy oil sands. Therefore, you can make the conclusion that the pipeline would not significantly exacerbate global warming, which then goes back to the test that President Obama gave the pipeline in his June climate speech.
Where he said he would only approve it if it did not significantly exacerbate the problem, correct?
Exactly. And so it appears that the pipeline has passed that test. The administration is, of course, not green-lighting it yet or at all, but it certainly seems to have passed that test.
And is this then setting up President Obama to approve the pipeline, do you believe?
I do believe. I think it continues him down this path of yes, but it still allows him an off-ramp to no. He can come up with a different reason for why the pipeline shouldn't be built, whether it could hurt him in international climate negotiations, or if he deems the symbolism of this pipeline is so important that it should be denied. This pipeline is so much more important symbolically than it is in real life. And he needs to take that into effect, because when it comes down to it, perception is reality, and this symbolism has become much more a real problem.
What's the EIS say about jobs?
The jobs is one part that President Obama weighed in on that today. The pipelines, the EIS said it would create, I think, some 40,000 temporary jobs. Obama refuted those numbers in an interview over the weekend. I think his own State Department said that, so I'm not sure about where the disconnect is on that front. I think the final jobs, like most infrastructure projects, is very few. Once you build that pipeline or that bridge or whatever, you're not going to have very many people hanging around on the bridge once it's built. Yeah. And so I think in the end, there's only going to be about 35 permanent jobs. And I think on both fronts, the jobs front and the climate front, it's not going to make as much of a difference as anybody thinks it will.
Now, the premise then, back to where you started, they say it will not, it itself will not significantly impact it because that oil is going to come out of the ground anyway. I mean, that's the premise, basically. It's one way or the other, they're going to drill and they're going to produce this oil. Is that necessary? Do you have to accept that premise? If there is no Keystone pipeline, how are they going to get it to market?
They will get it
to a refinery.
They will get it through rails, and we've seen...
rails to where?
Rails to refineries to...
Where?
Down to the Gulf Coast.
In Canada?
They'll go from Canada to other parts of the United States, from Canada to the United States. They'll do other pipelines. While the country has been fixated on Keystone, this other pipeline company, also from Canada, called Enbridge, has been making a killing on its own pipeline expansions. It's expanded its pipeline capacity from Canada to the U.S. significantly. And you don't need a presidential permit to expand an already existing pipeline. So if Keystone's not built, the oil will get out of the ground, just maybe not quite as quickly or quite as efficiently. And we've seen, a spat of increased oil rail accidents because there's been such a significant shift to that mode of transportation.
So yesterday, of course, this has been for a long time a political football. John Boehner seldom gets exercised, but he really got wound up yesterday when he was asked, now we're getting to the end of this complex decision-making process, and Boehner basically saying, complex? What's so complex about this thing?
We build pipelines everywhere in America every day. Do you realize there are 200,000 miles of pipelines in the United States? And the only reason that the president's involved in the Keystone pipeline is because it crosses an international boundary. Listen, we can build it. There's nothing complex about the Keystone pipeline. It's time to build it.
Listen. There are pipelines all over the United States today, right?
Yes,
there's no doubt about that.
Right.
And they may be, probably are, I guess most people consider them safer than rail, right?
Correct. And I would argue that the statistics would back that up.
Right. But this is as you indicated, this project is complex because it crosses so many states and it is an international boundary. You just can't say, right? And so, and plus, it has assumed an importance bigger than the pipeline itself, hasn't it?
I would say that this comment from Republicans and other supporters of the pipeline saying it shouldn't be so complicated, let's just build it, we're beyond that now. This pipeline is not about the pipeline. It's about Obama's commitment to climate change from the environmentalist perspective. And we have to have that debate. It really is about if we want to continue to develop fossil fuels or if we want to really double down on renewables.
That's what this is, the fork in the road, isn't it?
I think it is to the environmentalists, and the environmentalists have been so successful in this effort that that's becoming the conventional wisdom. I would argue that the pipeline should not have that large of a symbolic power over the politics in this country.
But it has.
But it has, and I think...
So from their perspective, right, just to follow this through if I can, if you're the president who has said, climate change is the most serious problem facing, and I'm going to be the one to do something about it, and we're going to go into a post-fossil fuel basic energy future, how can you approve this pipeline?
Well, I think there is that perspective where you want to say, eventually we need to get out fossil fuels. But the other reality is that Obama is president during an unprecedented time of oil and gas abundance. He has this oil and gas, these resources that are being developed right under his nose, and they're going to be developed with or without him. So he has taken it upon himself to support responsible development of oil and natural gas. And if you listen to the people closest to him on this pipeline issue, they say that the pipeline has been overblown. And so if you listen to what his EIS says, if you listen to what his closest former and current advisors say, one would lead that me and others to think that he will eventually approve it. And if he doesn't approve it, that would be a change in his thinking.